Hello everyone, I'm Sam Barber with MountAthletics.com, and you're watching the Mount Athletics video podcast. Every 2 weeks we'll be sitting down with athletes and coaches from around campus, catching up with them. You can watch the podcast on our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages. This week we'll be sitting down with the new men's and women's water polo coach, Alyssa Diacano, to get the ins and outs of starting a new program and recruiting and much more. So we just started water polo here at Mount St. Mary's University. What's it like, the transition from the Division II level at Mercyhurst up to the Division I level, which is the highest level of collegiate athletics?
Yeah, to be honest, I played Division I, so I would think the biggest transition was actually going from playing at a D1 level to coaching at a D2 level, but coaching at Mercyhurst actually is where I kind of found my love for coaching. And so water polo is unique because we all play under the same championship. So whether you're D1, D2, D3, we all see each other within our schedules each season. And so really any division could have a D1 mindset. And so I think the biggest difference is probably, resources. As a Division II coach, I definitely wore more hats, which I thought was really cool because I got to learn the ins and outs of things I might have not learned if I went straight into D1 where I have a lot of help. And so kind of feel spoiled here.
And when you're competing at San Diego State, you were a two-time All-American. You won Female Athlete of the Year at SDSU. Does that sort of, I know for me, like I would love to be named like NEC Athlete of the Year or something, but does that sort of, will that play into how you coach your athletes? And
to be honest, I think team awards speak much louder than the individual awards, and so I wouldn't have made it as far as I did if I didn't have a great team behind me. And so that's kind of the mindset I'll be carrying into my coaching career, is it's team first. The individual awards will kind of trickle in as the team's doing well, and so it's definitely a team focus, and then individual after that. And so it is cool, but I think it's more important that the team is recognized. So when we won conference as a team and went to NCAAs, like I will remember that more than I'll remember any individual award I've earned.
Now, I know for my team, the cross country and track team, when we're in Patriot, the team chemistry at any level is a huge aspect. We have like 20 people at a table, but now since obviously the coronavirus pandemic, we're not allowed that. Is the team chemistry, especially starting a first year program, is that sort of hard to build?
Yeah, you definitely have to be a little bit more creative. I don't think I've been on so many Zoom calls in my life or FaceTimes. But I have to really give credit to the teams coming in here. They've made an effort to get to know one another, on the academic side of campus too, which is going to make my life easier. And to see them already connecting, because some of them are roommates or they're living in the same hall and things like that, will make the transition to our team chemistry easier. So I give a lot of credit to the incoming teams, and they're making the best out of the situation too, so that'll help. Now, going back to your playing career, you played overseas in Australia as well as Malta, I believe. And I know, speaking from a student athlete's perspective, competing at the international level, that must be incredible. What was that? What was that like? Was it surreal? It was. It's very different. They're much more physical overseas than they are here, and so that was one part of my game I really had to change. But what I'm going to take away the most from that is the cultural experience. And it's not just, when you go to a place for 2 weeks, it's nice. You're on vacation, whatever it is, and you think you're kind of immersed into it. But once you live somewhere and you get to meet people and you kind of learn the ins and outs of the Australian lifestyle or how they live in Malta, you really appreciate what the country has to offer, and then it also makes you appreciate what we have to offer here too. And so both experiences, I think, have just really opened my view of the world and my perspective too. In Australia, they're so community oriented, so that's one thing I've taken from them, is just how important the team is and the social aspect of it. So it's not just getting to the pool deck, getting into the water, leaving. It's getting there early, talking, getting in the water, connecting with the older or the younger players as well after practice.
Now, when you were competing internationally, did you ever have any ambitions? Because as any athlete, they dream to be an Olympian. Did you have any ambitions of going out for the U.S. Olympic team?
That's actually really funny. So I started playing softball. Like, that was my main sport up until high school. And if you asked me in 8th grade, I wanted to be a softball Olympian. Like, that was it. And as I transitioned into the water polo world, I definitely did the ODP, which is the Olympic Developmental Program. But the U.S. water polo team is the top team in the world. They place gold, and so there's really talented athletes on that team. And I would be lying if I didn't say I would love to be on the Olympic team, but at the same time, it's awesome to see the level that they're competing at.
Yeah, I know for me, up until throughout high school, and up until probably once I got here at the Mount, and it sort of became like, I realized, oh yeah, maybe I should step back my goals a little bit, because I didn't realize that, oh yeah, making that next step to the Olympic level is a tremendous step, and it takes a lot more than just my creative mind. And I sort of was, I'm not sure if you felt this, disappointed when I finally realized my Olympic dream that I had since I was in 8th grade wasn't going to become a reality. Was that a sort of same feeling for you?
Yeah, I definitely, there's a realization moment, but going and playing overseas kind of filled that void for me. I do love to travel. I think it's really important and everything, but being able to play against Australian Olympians every week, I realized I could compete at that level. I held my ground, and so I wasn't as disappointed because I did play at a high level, and that also kind of got me into coaching. And if I wasn't playing on with the Olympic team, I wouldn't be here. And so, definitely everything happens for a reason. And
definitely. And now switching to recruiting, obviously recruiting has changed in the midst of a pandemic. I think you can talk to any coach, any incoming athlete or transfer athlete. How is recruiting been with a first-year program, starting in a new school, and obviously with the amount of restrictions you have?
Yeah, so when I first got hired, I looked at recruiting 2 teams for a new program as a challenge. 2 weeks later, COVID was kind of thrown into that. It was another bump in the road, but I just had to rise to the occasion, and I still had my goal of building the 2 teams to compete. So I just had to get more creative, and I really hit the virtual world, a lot more. The school did a really good job of putting up the virtual tours with admissions. I would walk prospective student athletes around campus on my phone. So it was different, and you really had to sell the experience of the Mount without them actually stepping foot here. So I also have to give the teams credit for kind of taking that leap of faith, and committing to the process, because if they didn't take that leap of faith without being on campus, none of us would be here.
Now, you said that with competing internationally, you love to travel. Your men's team especially, very culturally diverse. Serbia, Canada, Australia, the United States. What is, going back to team chemistry, do you sort of see that maybe as a challenge when they get into the water? Or are you excited to see how the different backgrounds will mix?
I am super excited. I think each of the athletes bring a different perspective, and so whether they're playing in Serbia, they're playing in Canada, they're playing in the US, they're all collectively bringing in their own unique experiences, and together we can build on that as a team. Not to say there won't always be rainbows and butterflies and all that. We'll definitely have to learn one another and how we communicate, but I definitely see it as an advantage bringing in that diversity.
Now, staying on the trail of recruiting, how did you even find athletes in Serbia or Australia? Because those are you're stretching your recruiting power so far. How did you even go about doing that?
Water polo is pretty small community, and so just within ourselves, a lot of connections with coaches and reaching out, just saying, hey, there's a unique opportunity at the Mount. Do you have any athletes that are interested? So I relied really heavily on the coaches, and so like Croatia, Serbia, Hungary, those countries are very big in water polo. Even where I was in Malta, men's water polo games are as packed as, our football games and things like that. And so I got connected with some of them through junior colleges, and then with the Canadians too, running different clinics at my previous school. And so it really comes back to the connections you have with the coaches, making sure you introduce yourself to anyone on the pool deck. And so that's kind of how I hit the international side of things, but I didn't set out to be like, I need an athlete from Canada, Serbia, Australia. Just that's what really worked out for us.
And with the women's team, I believe you have two athletes that won very high honors in California. So was it cool to see the sort of connection from being competing out in California and now we're here in Emmitsburg, Maryland? Was it cool to sort of see that connection?
It is. Like I said, I didn't intentionally go out and start recruiting like California athletes. I think the Mount adding men's and women's water polo is just a great opportunity for our sport as a whole. Definitely as an emerging sport, and our numbers continue to grow on the younger age levels, seeing it in a college and allowing these athletes to play at the collegiate level is huge. And then seeing, your own players come from a state that you played in is awesome as well. And convincing them that the big trip east isn't as bad as it might sound.
Yeah. Now, water polo, at least from my point of view, correct me if I'm wrong, is not sort of popular on the East Coast. It's sort of just becoming popularized. How do you see the state of water polo on the East Coast? Because it has such a big presence on the West Coast. Do you see it becoming as big on the East Coast as it is on the West Coast?
I do. I think there's so much untapped potential on the East Coast, and there's so many younger players wanting and willing to make that next step. Unfortunately, I think there is kind of an invisible line between the West and the East Coast, and sometimes I feel like we're at war with one another. And so, my goal being a California coach coming to the East Coast is to kind of merge those together, but also give kids on the East Coast the opportunity to stay close to home and play.
Now, you sort of dipped into the men's swimming and diving as well as the women's swimming and diving team. Do you think that will give your team sort of an advantage because they've already built a strong resume? I believe one of the male players has 2 school records. So do you see that as sort of a leg up on your competition?
Yeah, I definitely think it plays in our advantage that we have a swim and water polo team. I do have a male athlete and a female athlete as dual sports. So the background of swimming is huge in water polo, but unfortunately you can't just be a good swimmer to play water polo. It's a little bit more dynamic, but working with the swim team here, I think will definitely give us, upper hand in some aspects where student athletes want to do both. In high school, a lot of times, you're kind of recommended strongly to swim and play water polo, and that's certainly not the case in college, but we give them that chance.
Now, in terms of the season, that is obviously very up in the air. There's sort of, I know for my coach, we're trying to do a virtual NEC championships, which is very weird, competing on the track for races that really sort of, I guess, mean something but don't really mean something at the same time. So once you get to competition, who will you be competing against? Will you be going out west, staying on the East Coast? How does that sort of work?
Yeah, so we are in the CWPA for both the men's and the women's team. On the men's side, we're in the western region right now, so we'll play teams like Salem, McKendree, Gannon, Mercyhurst, among a couple others. So mostly on the East Coast. We have Navy about an hour and a half away, which is awesome. Bucknell's driving distance, so we'll have plenty of high-level competition. And then similar with the women, we're in the CWPA. We have Michigan, the Ivies in our league, St. Francis, and so we'll go a little bit Midwest, but right now we're mostly staying on the East Coast, but competition is still going to be high. Eventually my goal is to get us out to California just for the experience and the level of competition too.
Now, are you excited? Because I definitely want to see some water polo. I think that's I think it'd be sort of, as you explained, hockey. I think if you're a hockey fan, you can definitely find some enjoyment in water polo. Do do you see the sport of water polo gaining traction at the Mount, getting the fan support and the student body support? Because we just added bowling a few years ago, and that's seen a lot of success. Do you see the same for water polo?
I do. I think too the environment we're in on the pool deck makes it easy to be kind of a high level environment, because we're kind of close in, but just talking with everyone on campus, athletic side and academic side, I have seen a lot of support even up until this point, and no one's even seen us play. And so I can definitely imagine, once we're in the pool, it might take a couple games for people to catch on what's going on, but once they get the hang of it, it's definitely a fun sport to play, and I hope that we can eventually one day kind of crowd the pool deck with fans.
Now, obviously, you're in your first few weeks at the Mount. How has your time been? How is it adjusting from Pennsylvania to rural Maryland? How's that been?
Yeah. So I was hired at the beginning of March, and so I was here for about 2 weeks before everyone was sent home and the stay-at-home order was in place. And so even within those 2 weeks, I really got a sense of what the environment was here. I think my favorite memory was going to one of the women's basketball games, and President Trainer was one of the loudest cheers in the cheering section. And so, despite the uncertainties that lied ahead, I was excited that kind of support was coming from the top, just within athletics. And then the next past couple months, it's been crazy. I think everyone's been going through it one way or the other, but my mindset, you just kind of take it one day at a time, control what you can control, and then just keep learning as you go. And so to say that I'm finally on the pool deck here is exciting for me.
That's awesome. And when you finally get to practice, I know we were talking about this before the cameras came on. How will you be able to do it while also maintaining social distancing and everything?
Yeah, and so, the Mount's created our phase-in process. So the first couple weeks will be more individual, getting back in the water. Unlike soccer and lacrosse, running outside doesn't directly correlate to us swimming in the water and being in conditioning shape. So it's definitely getting the athletes back in the water, getting the feel for it, slowly easing our way back in, not trying to avoid injuries and things like that. But to start, we'll be in individuals, and then we'll start going into small groups, and then eventually by the end of the semester, we'll be full team ahead.
Now, your goals. Obviously, every single new coach has goals. When Coach Engelstad was hired for men's basketball and the women's bowling coach, now you're the latest coach at the Mount. What are your goals, let's say, 5 years down the road?
Yeah. Well, step one is being able to play. Step one is to check off season 1 off the list. But one of my biggest coaching philosophies is winning in and out of the water. And so it's creating student athlete success in the classroom, being competitive in the water. I want to win, they want to win, but most importantly, making sure that they're successful beyond the Mount. And so, through competition, obviously it's competing for a conference championship, and then hopefully making it to the NCAA, which is the big dance. I've gotten to experience it, and I would love for my players to experience it as well. But I definitely go back to their success as individuals as well, making sure they're successful, with getting a career, learning what sports have to offer. Definitely at the D1 level, you kind of have high expectations. As a student athlete, you definitely you have a little bit more responsibility. But I think, water polo has given me so much that it's my turn to give back to the sport, and creating an environment where these student athletes have a chance to excel.
Obviously, there's so many different avenues. For cross country, we go to regionals, and that's how you get to NCAAs. How does it work for water polo? Because do you go from the conference level to just the national level? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have our non-conference games and we have conference games. And so depending on the schedule, who you are, what region you're in, the first 2 months and the women's season will be more non-conference games, and then you get yourself into conference games. And then we'll go to a conference championship. And so within the conference championship, then the winner gets the automatic bid for the NCAA tournament. On the men's side, it's essentially the same routine, except you have one more qualifying weekend within the CWPA to make it to the NCAA tournament.
Now, you've said that you've experienced NCAAs. I haven't myself. I've only experienced it through a computer screen or a TV screen. What was that like? That must have been probably the coolest moment of your college career.
It was very humbling. I think that's what I walked away with it from, was because you were competing at the biggest stage, maybe away from the Olympic level, international, but that's the biggest stage water polo can compete at within the United States. And so just being on the pool deck with other Olympians, with teammates that you've played with your entire life, like being in that environment, it's truly humbling, and it makes all of that, the 6 a.m. lifts and workouts worth it. So
now, turning the clock back to recruiting, with your class, should fans see a young squad, an old squad, or sort of a mixture of both?
Yeah, so the men's side is a mix of both, predominantly incoming freshmen, but we do have experience coming back with some transfers and grad students. And then on the women's side, we do have a grad student in the goal, and then the rest of them are freshmen. So it's definitely going to be a fun experience to grow within the next 4 years and beyond.
And when you look at your team and you see obviously you said that it just happened to be happened to fall in your lap with recruits from Serbia, Canada, etc. Would you be willing to sort of take a trip, let's say, to those countries, where go back to Malta, go back to Australia, and have your athletes experience what you experience, and maybe use that as a recruiting trip?
Absolutely. I think that's one of my goals for sure. It's go to California and play and make a trip overseas. That'll come with time, fundraising, building the team to not just 2 subs. You definitely want to go overseas with, a bench, but I think that would be an awesome experience, as a team, from the team bonding aspect, individual development, and then just overall the cultural perspective you gain on those kind of trips.
And sort of what would the I guess a shining moment of once you finally get in the pool in season 1, what would be a sort of icing on the cake moment? I know we sort of touched base on this with just making it into the pool. What would be like, yes, Emmitsburg is my home?
I mean, I think our first game, win or loss, is going to be a huge monumental moment, and then I think our first win will be huge too. I think for me, though, to be honest, is just even our first practice, getting everyone in the pool, with the practice caps on, some type of scrimmage. I think that's when it's really going to hit me that, this is our program. We're here to stay.
And the connection between, you obviously mentioned the connection between water polo and swimming and diving. And do you sort of, I know for cross country and track, the men's and women's side, we're tight-knit. Even though we're like 150, we're a tight-knit family. Yeah. Is that something you'll hone in on, the importance of connectivity on the men's and women's side, even though they're not competing with each other?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing, I'm one coach, it's one program with 2 teams. And so the support that one team can give another and vice versa is just going to be huge in our success, whether it's from running game clocks or helping with setup, anything like that. And then just, the sense of community within water polo, on campus, allowing them to make those connections, I think will just help overall.
And in terms of going into a more general, going out of the pool, what's been keeping you busy throughout this entire 5-month sort of hiatus with the coronavirus? What's been keeping you busy?
Well, the first 2.5 months was recruiting, for sure. I think I spent majority of the day, talking to recruits, emailing recruits. And then as we entered summer more, it was building the program, and then for me on a personal side, it was just getting to know Maryland as well. And so, I made sure I was getting out and going on different hikes, visiting different lakes, kind of seeing my surrounding, immersing myself in Maryland so I could sell it better too. I think Maryland has a lot to offer. I think it's a very underrated state in my opinion. So I've definitely been pretty active outdoors, running, biking, all that kind of stuff, and then slowly continuing to put together our program and, one step forward each day.
Do you see obviously recruiting, when I got recruited, coming to the Mount, it was like coming from a big city to a small town of like 2,000. How do you, we just talked about selling Emmitsburg, how do you sell Emmitsburg to, let's say, a overseas athlete, or let's say someone that's coming all the way out from one of the big cities in California? How do you sell that and make it not just about water polo?
Yeah. Depending on what their interests are, it definitely goes back to if you're an outdoorsy person, we have hiking trails right behind our school. We have access to the Catoctin Mountains. You have Appalachian trails. You could be on a different trail each weekend if it's nice out. Emmitsburg itself, it's small, but it's quaint. You know one another. You're going to run into people at the grocery store. It's truly a sense of community. And then, even being an hour from Baltimore, hour from Annapolis, hour and a half from Washington, D.C., you just have access to just so many different things. One weekend you're outside hiking, the next weekend you could be in the city. And so that's what I sell, and it's not for everyone, and I get that, but it's delivering the truth with it. With
going back to Emmitsburg, do you sort of see, do you feel because I know what really drew me to the Mount was obviously the loving atmosphere of my team, my coaches. They were having like an actual coach for once. That was something that I never experienced. So do you feel when you walk through the halls of the Arc, if you traverse onto the academic side of campus, do you feel home now?
I do. I think at first it's always hard coming to a new place because you don't know anybody, and then you add the challenge of just meeting people, via Zoom. But being back on campus and just making those connections, even if it was a phone call over the summer, really paid off. And so now you can walk through campus and you can say hi to the president or admissions or people like that. And so, I think the reverse of that is they also say hi to you. And so it's definitely a two-way street, but everyone's been very welcoming.
And sort of staying on that route, with San Diego State, I've obviously never been on that campus, but I'm assuming it's pretty big. It is. Was that sort of a difficult transition? You after San Diego State, I believe you coached at the high school level out in California for some time. Was that you've made so many jumps from college to high school, back to college to pro? What was like? Is it good to sort of find some stability in the collegiate ranks?
Yeah, I like the adventure of it. I think every opportunity gives you a new perspective, and that's what I really like, is just the learning environment, the growth mindset. And so each of those levels have taught me something different. San Diego State, it was awesome. That's where I stepped on campus, and I knew that was my home, and so that's what I'm hoping that I can get student athletes here. They step on campus here, or they see it through a tour or whatever it is, and they're like, wow, this can be my home. And from there, that's kind of where I also gained the confidence to make those jumps or steps in any which direction. But I like the Mount because you can walk. You can walk everywhere. You're not riding a bike or driving from one end to campus to the next.
The whole gatherings and everything, that's sort of, I guess we're in the age of frowned upon gatherings. Does that, because I know for me, weekend events, whether it be hanging out in our dorms or something like that, how is that going to be? Obviously, you can only have so much of a connection with the athletes. How is that? How does that play into the pool, from like out of pool connections into in pool connections?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing that our team, the two teams bought into, was that we're going to have to make sacrifices in order to get back into the pool, and that's something that I give them a lot of credit for. I can't imagine being a college student right now, and being told not to go hang out with people, not to meet new people, because definitely freshman year, that's when you're supposed to be out, exploring. And so I give my team major credit for just committing to the fact that, we're going to wear masks, we're going to physically distance, we're not going to get into large groups right now until we're allowed to. And so I'm fortunate that they've bought into it because they know that at the end of that is the light, and that's pool. And, some of them haven't been in a pool since March. And so for us, the water is gold, and they've really bought into that. But otherwise, eventually, it's looking to do things as a team as responsibly as we can, whatever that is. Even on Zoom, if it's trivia or bingo or, there's activities on campus. So even if the school's putting on an event and that we can make sure that even our athletes or, our student athletes are there, abiding by those lines, at least they're together in one way or another.
And were you able to get all of your athletes from overseas? Were there any sort of, I can't even imagine the hoops you had to jump through to get them to the States. How was that?
Our last international student athlete got to campus August 18th, and that was like the first breath I took for a couple months because it has been ever changing. There was a time where I didn't think any of the internationals would make it, and that's half of the men's team. And so that was when I really had to go back to, okay, what can we control, taking it one day at a time. And thankfully it worked out. The Canadians got over the border, my Australian got the exemption, and, my Serbian athlete got his visa and everything. So very happy.
We'll definitely be, I guess, now watching from afar because of the pandemic, but we're definitely here at the Mount. We're definitely excited to see the water polo team take shape and transform into the future.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm excited too.
Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more in the next coming weeks.